Hey kids, welcome to Stylus Rumble. Harmony animation time thing. We're gonna do animation today. We're gonna play with our good friend Blue. And we're going to climb a ladder, which I need to add. So to start, no big announcements. People have been asking how you support the channel. I don't have a Patreon account and I have no intention of making one because I have no time for perks. Because the whole idea of perks to me, I just don't know what else I could throw in there that I actually have time to do. So if you want to download a version of Blue from Gumroad, you can throw a tip on there. Or if you want to click on some of my Amazon affiliate links, you need to buy something off Amazon anyway, you can click on my link, and even if you don't buy the book that I'm recommending, it will give me a tiny percentage of the sales there. That'll help out. So today's book and link is going to be The Cream of Tank Girl. This is book 1. There are 3 of them. And if you like super goofy, amazing illustration type artwork, there's so much stuff in here. There's rough sketches, there's storyboards. It's just everything you could ever want in a delicious book. That's today's book. Definitely recommend. I love the movie. I don't care what anybody says. I have it right there on my shelf. I should go show you. I think it's spectacular. I love Tank Girl. I love strong female characters, even if they're sort of insane. Especially if they're sort of insane. Doesn't matter. So today we are going to do... Oh, I already have it. Hello. You're going to be a ladder now. And we're going to do the ladder climb, which you may have guessed already. So I haven't made myself a ladder. I could have done this, I suppose, before I signed up for this gig. So this is a little bit of problem solving. And there are several ways that you could go about different pieces of it. And I think the main concern that most people have on here is the foot plant. I know the baby animators, when they get this, that's going to be their #1 concern. So first what I'm going to do is, if I got a ladder like this that wasn't broken up, I would break it up myself. So this back part I'm going to put on the underlay. This front part here I'm going to put on the overlay. And then all the rungs I'm going to leave on the line art. And here, obviously, don't draw anything twice. For the love of all that is holy, they're rungs. They don't need to be any different than one another. Here's our fantabulous ladder. All those years of art school are paying off, Mom. So often in animation, what you'll do is you'll get a 3/4 front character climbing a 3/4 front ladder. That's not unusual. It's just about staging. It's about what looks nice. So you'll get this awkward, like you could do the 3/4 back view of the character, but they don't want that. In your board, you'll have the 3/4 front character like this, climbing a ladder that is facing him, because staging. Hooray! So for awkward's sake, I will do that. And make a scene peg, and we'll fit all that stuff into our scene. So someone asked me if you redraw the characters if they're close up, and you don't if you're doing cutout, because the whole idea of cutout is to save yourself time. If you're doing something very close up, like super duper large, if your character had fat line art, you might want to thin out the line art, but you just thin it out on the actual character. You wouldn't create a new character for that. Be a big time sink. So first thing we got to do is get him in the position of the ladder that we want him to. So because I've separated my ladder into a bunch of different pieces here, the easiest one I like to do it is to use my layer selectors. So the line is the rungs, the overlay is the overlay, this front part, and then the underlay is in the back. So Blue's always going to be in front of this back part, the underlay. So what I'm going to do is just cut the underlay with Blue, rather than try and muck around with the Z-axis too much. And I actually did some research watching some ladder climbing videos. There are 2 different ways to climb the ladder, so you have to think about what way you want to do it. Either the character's hands go on the ladder like this as they climb up, like that, or they wrap their arms around the outside. So this is more of a fireman style. When he has something in his hands, he's going to put it on the outside of the ladder, but most people tend to put their hands in on the ladder. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do the rung version. So first step, he's going to grab the ladder, and he's probably going to grab this guy here. We're going to wrap our arm around. Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time doing the drawing substitutions, so we'll pretend when we need to that his hands are a little bit better than they are. So number one thing here, I want the upper arm to be the one that's in front. Like this line here is ugly. One thing I see baby animators do is to create an overlay and then paint. And that is something that you want to reserve for something that's really a pain to fix. You don't want to do it with elbows and shoulders too much because you have to move it. If you get a revision, then you have to repaint everything. So if you have some convoluted thing down here in the pelvis that's really not working, maybe sneak a little bit of paint in there. Or if you're going to do that, put it on something that's going to move. Like if you had to repaint this, create a drawing substitution in here and then repaint the arm. Don't have it floating outside, because getting somebody else's revisions for that is just such a pain in the butt. But what we can do is switch Blue's arm here. I have it built in so that I can switch this from a nub to a flat, and now it's facing backwards. So it feels a little bit awkward here. So what I might want to do is just create a drawing sub and then shorten that line up, just make sure it looks good. And we're going to pull this arm forward here. I guess I should have had a neutral pose, huh? Let's add that in. So I have a little bit of a turn Blue. He's a little bit closer to the ladder. I think I probably should have used that one. I'm going to use that one. So what I'm going to do is copy this shoulder and paste it in. And we're going to use this blue. And then I've saved my other guys over here. So I'm going to get my generic blue here. Once we get this done, he's reaching for the ladder. Left arm up, you're going to put your right leg up. So just think when you're walking, you're going to use separate, like the opposite leg when you step. You're also going to do that with your ladder here. And it really helps to just go Google ladder, climb ladder. You would be astounded how many videos there are of people climbing ladders, because there's tons of stuff on ladder safety and firemen climbing ladders and looking really good doing it, stuff like that. So there's no trouble to go find reference for this in our modern age. You could even like find a ladder and ask your friend to climb it and you can record it. All right, so this foot here needs to be behind this, but rather than playing around with the Z-axis or anything, I'm gonna just grab a cutter, and I've separated that onto an overlay so I could just cut that. So now anytime Blue is behind that, it's gonna cut easily, not a problem. And I'm just going to make sure that my toes line up here on the ground. The next issue is keeping everything planted as he climbs the ladder. So we have two choices. We could either track the foot and the arm, or we could make a duplicate and we could attach that to the ladder. So what I'm going to do is a little bit of both. I'm going to track the foot and I'm going to drawing sub the hand. So that way we can see how we do both of those things. So I'm going to create a drawing substitution for the hand and then empty it. And then I'm going to make a drawing substitution for the ladder, or I can create just a hand drawing. So I think that'll be a little bit easier. I'm going to connect it to the ladder's peg, and I'm going to call it hands. The good thing about having this hand drawing is you're not going to muck up your ladder, because you might accidentally shove a rung or something and then it'll jump and that's going to be a pain. But the disadvantage is now you have to work out the leveling of this guy here. So again, I'm going to use my layer selectors. I'm going to use a line and a color art, LA for line art, CA for color art. And anything I need behind, I'm going to move my color art to the back. And my line art, I'm going to move to the front. Boop. And then we're going to have to give ourselves some new hands. This guy can go on the color art. That works pretty well. I'm just going to hack these off and do some half-hearted hand drawing subs here. So whenever I'm doing drawing subs, I always say to do a good job. And then I do a real raggedy job, because this isn't for my show reel, so I'm going to do some raggedy stuff. But you want to take the time to do some real nice hands. You could even reuse them all the time, stuff like that. And I'm going to create a drawing substitution for my lower arm and then hack off the line art. All right, so this is similar to what we did in our piggyback, where I'm going to be able to move the arm and stuff, and it's not going to move the hand. One thing that it's good to be aware of is what you're using to actually gain your vertical height, because what a lot of babies will do is they'll move up, say, the torso, and then they'll move up the legs and stuff, and then the vertical movement is happening on several different pegs. So what I like to do is come into my character here and make sure that I'm on my top peg inside the group and use that as my vertical climb. And then I match the limbs to the climb. So there's no real right way to do that. Either way is fine. You can use multiple pegs to do the same thing, or you can use the master peg here. Really, the important thing is that you're making an actual decision on that. Because if you're consciously saying, I'm going to use this for my vertical movement all the time, or you're saying that the torso and the pelvis are going to move separately but move up the rungs at the same time, you're not going to use the pelvis and torso sometimes and then your master peg sometimes, and then your vertical movement is on two different locations. That can cause you problems down the road if you have to change something, or if the animation has to go to somebody else who's doing the revisions, because you're not always going to be doing your own revisions. And the way I'm going to determine how high it should go on my next frame, because I'm just kind of stacking my keys down here, I'm going to move them up later, is I'm going to straighten up this leg, and that's as high as he's going to get on that leg. Boop, boop. And he's going to start reaching for the next rung. So if you have a really timid character, very short legs, what you could do is bring this leg up onto this rung and go one rung at a time. So he'd go foot, 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 foot. It might take a long time. Depends on the pacing of your scene. But a character with giant spider legs like this, he's going to go one or two rungs at a time. He could probably do that. So let's bring his leg up. I have to do some Fakie perspective. So with a character this lanky, it's going to be a little bit tricky. Want to aim for something that looks like it's passable. Like he'd need to put his knees outside the rungs of the ladder. So you're just going to have to forgive yourself for some bad perspective on that. And make sure your hips look good. You never want jacked up hips. Let's bring that to the next frame, actually. I want to keep this down a little bit longer. So we're going to have to twist this torso in so that he can reach the next rung. Okay, so we're going to have a big up, and then he's not gaining as much as he puts his feet on. And make sure our hand next grab pose. And this is almost like a straight ahead animation while being keyed at the same time. Because I'm not really doing big keys here. I'm going to do every piece of the step. And I'm going to have to in between it a little bit, but it's far from big vague keys. So again, we're going to need to get this guy working. And I'm using the same hand drawing as the other hand. I don't have two separate hands going. I don't feel like that's necessary. But depending on how complex your motion is, if you feel better having all your pieces on separate layers, then by all means do so. That's good enough. So now this foot, it doesn't need to be super specific because it is going to roll a little bit as things go around, but you want to make sure that it feels like it's supporting the weight and that it's not sliding off. So if this is sliding back too much, it's going to feel like he's slipping off the ladder, but it doesn't need to be ultra super precise. That feels good. It's not slipping. It is rotating, but that's not a problem. And then here, that feels close enough. Right, so now we're going to take our next big step. I'm going to use my inside peg to do my vertical movement. Straighten this leg out so we know how high we can go. And it might be worth your time to come back and grab your vertical leg from another place if it's too much trouble to get it back, going back to the right position. Oop. Now we're going to go up that high. This guy's going to drag. There we have a shoddy hand of it coming around. Make sure our foot's far enough to the left here on our ladder. And then track our foot. Alright, so I continue on this way until I had all my pieces done. Bring this guy forward a little bit. So that's about the gist of it. The next key we're going to want is him stepping on the ladder with his right foot. So let's see if we can just grab this keyframe here of him stepping with his right foot. This arm might need to be adjusted, but we'll switch that in there. And then this master peg we've been using for our Z-axis, we can just take that one out and it's going to keep it at the level that we were just using. So we're gonna need to adjust it a little bit to get this foot to line up. But now you can see we're much closer to where we need to be than if we'd started from scratch and created a whole new key. So even though this seems like a fairly complex motion, it's still a cycle. A ladder climb is very similar to a walk cycle. It's a climbing cycle. So the hands, of course, are going to have to be grabbed and pasted in. But you can see that this works fairly well. Boop, 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 boop. Redraw hands as you need them, but I'm just going to skew mine because ain't got time for that. Boop. And now we'll go back to where we had this hand, and we'll just copy and paste that stuff. Copy, paste, bring it up. This may or may not work depending on how accurate your perspective is, but so we've got right leg forward. We're going to have to go through later and fix pockets, little things like that, but that's not a big deal for right now. Boop. That's the right leg forward. So the next one we need is the step up from there, this one here. So copy and paste it, get rid of the top layer, and then adjust. So now, right leg extended, we need the left leg planted. That's this one here. Copy, paste, adjust your vertical height. So this is the advantage to using that master peg to control your vertical climb, because if you're using your pelvis and your torso in some convoluted way, then you're going to have to keep track of a lot more stuff. But now, because all my vertical climb is on this guy here, I can reuse these keys very easily. And obviously I'm going to have to keep adjusting my hands here, and that could give an argument for keeping the left and right hand on separate drawings, because then I could copy and paste and move them using the animation tools instead of drawing tools, but not a huge deal. Either way is fine. So once you've got as much vertical climb as you need, you know you need to do it in 70 frames, and you can just extend your stuff along the 70 frames. Make sure that they're odd numbers, because we're going to do this on 2s. We're not barbarians. Make sure to extend your hands as well. So there we go. We're starting to get what we need in there. And once you get this far, it's a matter of just filling in the spaces in between. I'm not sure how well it would actually tween. Let's just watch for... You know, it's not the worst. The timing is very, very even because we're just straight tweening it. The real thing here is you want to really take the time to make sure that these feet stay planted. The hands, you can see, are working fairly well as it is. So let's just convert this to 2s. Gotta lose all my... Good enough for good enough. And now we're going to set it on 2s. Now, the set on 2s button doesn't work on big rigs with lots of Z information, and my friend riggers have told me why. When I set up the blue rig, and something I've been doing for a long time, I use the coordinates control panel and I put 0.0001 because that's the smallest increment that the coordinates tab will take. But it turns out that the timeline only takes 3 significant digits, so 001. You can add a whole additional 0 in here, but the timeline won't know that it exists. I don't know why this is the case, but this will take 4 significant digits after the decimal. This will only take 3. So I'm beginning to only use 3 significant digits, and then the scripts like this guy where it sets things to 2s are going to work a little bit better for you. You're not going to have as many Z problems. There we go. So once it's set on 2s, it already looks better because 2s are always better. Boop, boop, boop. And it's a little bit slower probably than I would want. But the important thing now is to go through and make sure that these feet are 100%. So let's bring this foot around first of all. There we go. So now we counter animate. This is not a fun part of animation, but it's so necessary to tidy this stuff up because nobody likes skatey slidey legs. A lot of baby animators really rely on the keyframe, like the auto tween, to handle things, and they trust it a little bit too much. Like, it definitely saves you a lot of time rather than framing every single piece yourself, but it's not perfect. So don't just get that far and then stop. You want to plant this foot. Even there, this is going to be stretched a little bit more. Remember, we're giving it a little bit of leeway. It can rotate as the character goes along, but it's not going to gain so much ground until this is planted up here. So there, this is planted, and now if you watch it, you can definitely see where that leg is coming apart there. Alright, so we got the feet locked. There's a little pop here where it gets straight too fast. Boop. Like I said, it's a little bit slow, but that's something you should fix in your initial frame spreading. Hello. So it's really still, at this point, really stiff. So ways that you could get around that is just to loosen up the head a little bit, get some head bob in there. The usual stuff that you think about when you're doing, a walk cycle, you can use that for a climb cycle as well. Because if we take this off, you can see that he's climbing here in a cycle. Whoop, 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 whoop. Because all the vertical climb is on this guy here. So you can turn this off and then work on your cycle a little bit. Get the hips working a little bit nicely, get the head bob and stuff in there, and then you can have it climb again. It's a little harder to do something like a walk cycle you do like this. A skate works a little bit better because you don't have to line it up to these rungs as precisely. But you can work back and forth both ways if you're conscious of keeping your climb on one peg. All right, so geez, that took an hour. So hopefully I can edit this down to something that's not too annoying. That's it for today. If you have anything that you'd like to see animated or you'd like help with, things that you want to see as tutorials, please leave comments down below. As I mentioned in my previous video, I'm thinking about doing a little bit more drawing stuff next year, just because I like drawing and I want to do some of the stuff for my short film. So maybe we can talk about backgrounds a little bit and props because I've been investigating that. I want to do more research into background design because it's something I've done a little bit of, just a little bit of freelance here and there and stuff I do on my own time, but it's not something I've done a huge amount on. So definitely want to get more into that, more into storyboarding as well. So many things we're going to explore next year. So come along. I have no plan. Like, share, subscribe, all those things internet people ask you to do, and I will see you in the next video.